a beautiful introduction. I want to thank Kay and Emily and the whole staff for making these beautiful things and decorating with the tickets and all the posters. This is a gorgeous event, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of it, and thank you all for being here and for the delicious lunch. We have some technical stuff that we're going to try to do today. I've got clips of films. I can't talk about film without showing you some films. So bear with us as we work through the clips. I've got Emily here, who's graciously been voluntold to help me. And she's going to be hit and play on our clips, and hopefully it'll go pretty seamlessly, and we'll walk through our day together, our century of American film, and tracking the rise of the American heroine. When I talk about film, often I'm talking about film like a text, like a novel, where we're looking at the characters and we're thinking about trends in the world. Today's talk is going to be a little bit of that, but a little bit of some other things too. I'm going to look at the economy. This is something we don't usually get in a film talk. I'm going to talk about box office numbers, ticket sales. And the reason I'm doing that in this particular talk is because I have a thesis that I'm hoping that you'll come on board with, that we can gauge public opinion about the roles women can play based on how they rewarded the roles women played on screen. So if we have a film with a damsel in distress character, and we reward that film with our money, with ticket sales, with high box office revenues, Hollywood is going to continue to make that type. Hollywood is first and foremost a business. It wants predictability. It wants its investors to be assured of a return on their investment in order to continue to make more movies and make more money. We think about film a lot of times as an art form, something experimental, something that's coming from our heart and our soul. And we have to be realistic about the fact that Hollywood is not trying to make art. We get frustrated with films sometimes. We're like, ugh, another superhero movie, come on, another sequel, another remake. There's a good reason for that. It's less risky, better chance for a return on our investment. And so that's the kinds of thinking that Hollywood has had from the very beginning. So if we accept that Hollywood is a business, we can learn a lot about how Hollywood has influenced our ideas about roles for women and how we have shifted Hollywood with our expectations. If we do not reward the damsel in distress film, and instead we all go see a Wonder Woman style film, Hollywood is going to pay attention. They're going to see what movies make money, and they're going to continue that type of character. So in so doing, what my goal for today is to take us through the last 100 years in 1 hour, 55 minutes according to Kay, of American cinema, and give us hints of what the country was thinking. How did we conceive of the ideal woman in different times and places throughout our history, and how can we see that reflected in our film, and how can we see film challenging that expectation and that dynamic, that interplay. So that's our goal for today, and I'm excited to hopefully have you guys on board with this. We've got the silent film era. Do you think I could scooch this so I could see my slide a little bit? Get even closer to y'all over here? Yeah. Is it okay? Okay. So we're, but the microphone doesn't like that. Maybe I'll go back where I was. Sorry, I'm good, it's cool. So our types, we have types in our silent film era. Virgins and vamps and fallen women. Can anyone name these beautiful ladies for me? Who's this all the way over on the side? Clarabow. Nope, not Clarabow. Lillian Gish, muy bien. And in the middle? Theda Bara. And on the far side? Greta Garbo. Good job. All right. A for the day so far. So the reason we see these types, the same actresses playing the same types of characters over and over and over, is exactly what we talked about at the beginning, the predictability. If I know everyone's going to go see Lillian Gish in a movie where she plays the same type of character over and over, I'm going to write her that same character over and over and keep getting you back. And it's making her a star, and it's making me, as a Hollywood studio, more money, and everyone is happy. They're getting what they want. They go into a Lillian Gish film expecting her to be a certain character. So let's learn a little bit about Lillian's character. She is the quintessential virtuous heroine. She joined Biograph, her first production company, claiming to be 16. We're not exactly sure what her age, but it kind of doesn't matter because she continued to play 16-year-olds until she was almost 30. So it really doesn't matter how old she really was. Don't you wish we could all have done that? So as you can see, who knows how old she is in this picture, but she's playing a 16-year-old. And her classic plot line should be very familiar to you. Virtuous heroine, preferably in distress, plus a rescuing hero, minus the lecherous villain, equals the happy ending. This is a classic Gish film, and she was the muse for a very famous American director of the time, D.W. Griffith. His most infamous film is this still on the side, The Birth of a Nation. This film was in 1915, and it's infamous because the rescuing hero, in this case, are Klan members. So we have Lillian being beset upon by a mob and rescued from the certain loss of chastity and virtue by the rescuing Klansmen. So this was her type. This was the character she played over and over and over. Sometimes she's a French girl beset upon by German troops in World War I. Sometimes she's a British girl beset upon by her drunk boxer father. Sometimes she's an American girl beset upon by mixed race hellions running about town. You never know what her deal is. What you can be sure of is that she's chronically endangered, is completely incapable of helping or rescuing herself, and must rely on her knight in shining armor to come charging in and rescue her. She was, without question, the biggest star of the silent film era. So when we think about the stories, the type that she played over and over, we have to think about how many people saw her play this role over and over again. How this was a part of American film culture at the time, to see Lillian Gish chronically endangered and rescued over and over. She made $800,000 every 2 years in the 19-teens. She was a huge star. At the same time, we have a very, very different kind of heroine, Theda Bara. Now, Theda was from Ohio. She made up her name, she made up a huge fictitious backstory, and it changed all the time. Sometimes she was given up for lost, an orphan found by the foot of the Egyptian pyramids. Sometimes she was the daughter of an Italian artist and an Arab sheikh. Like, you have no idea. Crazy stories she invented, and she changed them all the time. So she was this exotic other. And her type was not the virtuous Victorian heroine. Her type was the vamp. I'm going to show you a clip of the vamp in just 1 second. The vamp threatens social order. Where the heroine keeps the family dynamic in place, the virtuous heroine, the Gish heroine, this heroine, the vamp, threatens it. She is close to the occult, pure evil. Her tempting you is going to lead to your downfall. And you won't even be culpable. It's not your fault, man of America. You were just lured into the clutches of this purely evil, overly sexual, predatory vamp. So here is a gorgeous, amazing example of the vamp, Theda Bara. Now, her film is called A Fool There Was, also 1915, exact same year as Birth of a Nation, where the Klansmen rescue Lillian Gish. A quick backstory, just so you know what you're about to see before you hit play. Theda's character has read in the newspaper that a very wealthy man is about to get on a transatlantic ship and go over to London to visit his dying brother, and leaving his wife and child behind. So she has the opportunity to prey upon this very wealthy man while his wife is far away. So she gets her life together, pawns all her things to buy the ticket to get onto the ship, and her whole goal is to seduce this man, lure him away from his loving wife and daughter, and have her way with him. And then, obviously discard him when she's done with him. She's not interested in marrying him. That's not what a vamp does. She plays with him. He's her play toy, and she's going to destroy him and leave him in the dust. So let's get a tiny little glimpse of the vamp. keep my phone up there to keep track of the time? I'll tell you. Okay. I love Theda Bara. So you get, this is a perfect tiny little glimpse of the vamp. Next up we have America's sweetheart, Mary Pickford. So if Gish is not quite a woman, she's a child that we have to protect. We have to protect her virtue. She's not a sexual object. We don't want to marry her. We want to keep her safe. And Theda Bara is quite the opposite. We have no hope of keeping her safe. We better keep ourselves safe. And she is absolutely a sexual object. Mary Pickford is a virtuous character of a different kind. I love this quote. This is Mary's line. "I am a woman's woman. My success has been due to the fact that women like the pictures in which I appear." So she is equally attractive to men and women. And we can't say this for either Gish or Theda Bara. So she is dominating the marketplace because she's getting both men and women. Without question, the most successful actress of her time. She is also notorious, which I love, and I teach all my young female filmmakers about her. She ruthlessly negotiated for her contracts herself. She wanted control over what roles she could play. She wanted to get a percentage of the profits if everyone was coming to see her. In fact, in 1909, she appeared in 51 films in that year. One a week. So she wasn't trying to get something for nothing. She was working, and she wanted to profit from her work and not have others profit from her work. So she formed her own production company later in her life. This slide on the side, you can see her on set behind the camera instead of in front of the camera. She co-founded the studio United Artists with Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, Gish's director, and her husband Douglas Fairbanks. Before that, though, she was an actress, and that's how she made her name. Her nickname was Blondie Locks, for an obvious reason. And you could see Nickelodeons with just Blondie Locks on the sign outside, and people would come in and see. She made 51 films a year. You can't follow those titles. I don't know which one is which. All I know is Blondie Locks is in it. I'm there. This is a clip from her 1915 film called Rags. So same year as A Fool There Was, Theda Bara's film, same year as Lillian Gish's film, Birth of a Nation. In this film, you'll see that she has a lightness of spirit. She's spunky. She has something very missing in today's world, gumption. And this resonated with women of the time. My theory on why Pickford was so popular with women is because she was a character that they could identify with that wasn't as radical as the flappers and the suffragettes. She didn't chop off all her hair and march in the streets. She had her long blondie locks, but she had spirit. She wasn't chronically endangered. If something was troubling her, she dealt with it herself. In this clip from Rags, you'll see our young heroine has heard that her drunk loser father is in the local saloon causing trouble. And in a similar Gish film, Gish just stays home and waits for her father to come home and terrorize her. Pickford has a very different idea about what best to do. Oops, hold on. There you go, sorry baby. Nope. Try this one.
This one?
she great? Mary Pickford. As we transition into the Roaring Twenties, the virgin and the sweetheart characters are falling out of vogue for a variety of reasons. The ingenues, Mary Pickford and Lillian Gish, are now in their 30s. So it's very difficult for them to play the adolescent characters that made them really famous. Also, film technology is changing dramatically, and now talkies are all the rage. And none of our three amazing silent film stars successfully make the transition to talking film. And so Theda Bara never even tries, and Lillian and Mary do try, and it doesn't go very well for them. And so they shift their careers into other ways and make space for different kinds of heroines in the Roaring Twenties. Most significantly is that popular ideas about women are changing in this time, and we have the flapper. So no more sentimental Victorian heroine for us. We have a rebellious flapper. She is reflecting the moral climate of this particular era in American history. She's youthful, spirited, impulsive. She implies a party with no end. And as you can see very clearly here, marketing and advertisers jump onto the flapper bandwagon, and they use her to sell just about anything. So we've got makeup, cars, what is that, deodorant, soda, cigarettes, I don't even know what this is, chocolate, you name it, the flapper can sell it for you. So she's ubiquitous. She's everywhere. So of course it would make sense that anything but the flapper in films is not going to be as popular as the flapper. One silent film star did make that transition very successfully, and her archetypal character was neither virgin nor vamp. She was the fallen woman. Greta Garbo. Just take a quick look at some of her titles, shall we? And maybe you can guess what kind of movies she made. Torrent, The Temptress, Flesh and the Devil, Love, A Woman of Affairs, The Kiss, Mata Hari, you name it. Greta Garbo made it between 1926 and 1940. She made a series of films where she was the fallen woman. So this is an evolution of the vamp. The vamp is your downfall. How can we neutralize that, but keep the sexiness of everything the vamp offers? This is the answer, the fallen woman. She's passionate, but she does not aspire to wifehood. It's very convenient. You don't have to worry that you're going to lose your manhood at the hands of this devouring creature. You can trust to the illicit goodness of the hooker with a heart of gold. It starts here. So we have a vamp. She's a beautiful courtesan or prostitute or showgirl or some other character that's got a checkered past. This time, instead of just being a vamp, she's got an Achilles heel. She is susceptible to love. Theda Bara is susceptible to nothing. Garbo is susceptible to love. So she falls in love with a young man and he with her. But we cannot have our young man marry her. She has a checkered past. That will never do. But nor can we have him abandon her, because what would that say about him? So how to get out of this conundrum? What usually happens for the fallen woman is someone from his past or his family takes her to the side and explains to her that she will be his downfall. He'll lose his inheritance. He won't get the job. His family will, abandon him. And she has to fall on her sword, drive him away. Usually ends very badly for her. She almost always dies. And he, naturally, goes on to marry an upstanding young woman who doesn't have a checkered past, and all ends well for him. So this is how Hollywood neutralized the vamp by making her, we get all of the good that we wanted out of her, all of the sexual tension and chemistry and glamour, and we don't have to worry about her devouring our male characters. There is a variation on this theme, the reformed or redeemed fallen woman, played to great success by Gloria Swanson. She was in a film called Sadie Thompson, in which she is a young prostitute with nothing but partying and drinking and jazz and smoking on her mind, meets an upstanding young man, and he falls in love with her and is telling one of his friends, one of the best lines ever, "Them that kicks the highest settles down the hardest." So this idea that you could change her, she converts to Christianity. She prays for 3 whole days. We have a scene where she's putting away her feather boas and all of the trappings of her previous life and settling down with a good man in Australia. This idea that she was wicked once, she found God, she changed her ways and married a good man, and we can have a vamp as long as at the end she is no longer bears any resemblance to the vamp. This is due in large part to this, do I call him a gentleman? This man, Joseph Breen, Hollywood's censor. So in the corner I have 2 pictures of the most famous flapper of them all, Betty Boop. Betty Boop in 1933 looks like a flapper. Betty Boop in 1939, what does she look like to you? A housewife, the first thing I heard. Yeah, she's very modest. She's very buttoned up now. And she's in a house, and she's not flapping anymore at all. So this is due in large part to the production code and this man, Joseph Breen, who ran the production code administration from 1934 to 1941. The production code was an attempt by Hollywood to voluntarily self-censor. In the 1930s, we had some crazy movies coming out. So if you wanted to send your kid to the movie theater for the day and get them out of your house, you wanted to count on the fact that they could do that and come back unscathed. But in the 1930s, we had Warner Brothers, and they wanted to make big gangster pictures, lots of death and blood and destruction, loose morals running rampant. And so a lot of citizens, understandably, started threatening theater boycotts, started threatening to try to impose government-regulated censorship on Hollywood. And this is the last thing that Hollywood can stomach. They want predictability. They want to ensure that their films will be released. And if there's a government censor involved, well, that's not predictable. So they agree to allow the Production Code Administration to approve their films. They passed a document that had a list of all the things you could not show, including extramarital affairs, completely forbidden by the code. And also, most importantly, I think, they were tasked with promoting traditional values. So we think about, what does this mean for our female characters? If the only way my film is going to pass the code and get into theaters is if it promotes traditional values, that's why we're going from Betty Boop on one side to Betty Boop on the other side. One of those boops is promoting traditional values and the other one is not. So this is a problem for the more artistic of our filmmakers. They want to write characters however they want to write them. They don't like being hemmed in by the code. But one of the great things about artists is they love a challenge. They love to find a loophole. They love to find a way to get around whatever rules you're trying to impose on them. They're going to figure out a way out of it. So the code, we don't love the code, but the code did bring us some interesting stuff. For example, an era of fast-talking dames and career gals. If I can't show an affair, if it's forbidden by the code, how can I get at that? What loophole can I find? And born of the code comes this subgenre called the comedy of remarriage. Totally ludicrous. This idea that a couple would divorce, flirt with some other people during the duration of the film, and then get back together at the end. Over and over, very popular genre throughout the 30s and the 40s. These are two amazing examples, both starring Cary Grant. This one on the, what is this, your left, with Rosalind Russell, 1940, and also 1940 with Katharine Hepburn, Philadelphia Story. The great thing for tracking our heroines, the reason the comedy of remarriage is so important to our heroines, is it gives us an opportunity in 1940 to explore an independent woman, financially independent, living on her own, making her own decisions, managing her own money, in the confines, in the constructs of a family dynamic. She's married at the beginning, she gets divorced, she has a crazy time, we get to get used to that idea, and then she gets back together with him at the end. Not even with someone new, with the same guy as before, Cary. Would you marry someone else if Cary Grant was your choice? Probably not. So what's amazing about the comedy of remarriage is it allows the country time to start thinking about how they feel about an independent woman who can file for divorce, who can make her own money, and do so in a safe space where we know she's going to get remarried to Cary again at the end. So I'm going to show you a quick clip from His Girl Friday. In this clip, Rosalind has already divorced Cary. He was her editor at the newspaper, and she is a reporter who used to be his subordinate and now is doing just fine on her own. And this is the one where I'm going to stand over near you and hit pause about halfway through. Is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that he fixed it.
Oh, okay.
Well.
You hear it?
How
Okay?
long is it?
How long is what?
You know what? How long is it since we've seen each
Halfway
other?
through, yeah.
Oh, well, let's see. I spent 6 weeks in Reno, then Bermuda, about 4 months, I guess. Seems like yesterday to me.
Maybe it was yesterday, Hildy. Did you see me in your dreams?
Oh, no, Mama doesn't dream about you anymore, Wally. You wouldn't know the old girl now.
Ah, yes, I would. I'd know you any time, any place.
Anyway. Ah, you're repeating yourself, Wally. That's the speech you made the night you proposed.
Yeah, I notice you still remember it.
Of course, I remember it. If I didn't remember it, I wouldn't have divorced you.
Yes, I wish you hadn't done that, Hildy.
Done what?
Divorce me. Makes a fellow lose all faith in himself. Almost gives him a feeling he wasn't wanted.
Oh, now, look, Junior, that's what divorces are for.
Nonsense. You've got an old-fashioned idea. Divorce is something that lasts forever, till death do us part. Why, divorce doesn't mean anything nowadays, Hildy. Just a few words mumbled over you by a judge. We've got something between us nothing can change.
Well, I suppose you're right in a way, Wally.
Sure, I'm right.
I am fond of you, you know.
And a girl?
Oh, I wish you weren't such a stinker.
I got it. I just love the way they talk about divorce. You act like it's something that's real. It's not real. It's not a real thing. So we're changing. We're talking about the dissolution of marriage. We're talking about a woman managing her own money and being her own boss. These are fairly radical concepts as far as American film is concerned at this point in history. And we're doing it with two of the biggest stars of the era and in a very lighthearted, banter kind of a way that allows it to reach a lot of people who maybe would not necessarily be comfortable with this idea, but they love Cary and they love Rosalind and they love the fast-talking banter of the time, and so these ideas are gaining traction. Also, in Philadelphia Story, Hepburn wears trousers. At the same time, there's another genre of film that is becoming very popular in America, and that is film noir. So, Excuse me, we've got Lauren Bacall all the way over on the left, Barbara Stanwyck in the middle, and which famous North Carolinian do we have all the way over on the right? Of course, Smithfield's own. So these are the stars, some of the female stars of the film noir genre. What is the name of a female character in noir films, do you know? They're typically called something. A femme fatale, right? So what does that mean? What kind of woman is a femme fatale? Well, she's fatal. She's dangerous, she's mysterious, she has, at the very least, ambiguous morals, maybe completely terrible morals. She's also beautiful, she's villainous, duplicitous, she's gonna manipulate you. And maybe you're going to be okay with that, and maybe you're not, but either way, she's in charge. She's the femme fatale. At this time, we start getting terminology like this: bombshell, knockout, dress to kill, femme fatale. So we start equating the notion of a bombshell as being both beautiful and deadly. This is who? Rita Hayworth, that's right, 1946, Gilda. So we're connecting beautiful with dangerous. And bombshells have gone nowhere. We still have them today. They came all through the 50s. We have Sophia Loren, Marilyn Monroe. In the top here with the white dress, she may not be as familiar to you, that's Jean Harlow from 1933. She's the original. Her film was called Bombshell. Raquel Welch, Sofia Vergara, and Scarlett Johansson. These are my ideas for who we might consider bombshells today. Beautiful and dangerous. This leads us into the 50s, where, in my opinion, movies sexed up and dumbed down. And our bombshells have paved the way for Marilyn Monroe. Now think about America in the early 1950s, and why do you think it would be in Hollywood's best interest for movies to sex up and dumb down? Why do we no longer want fast-talking career gals? The war is over. The boys are home. They need to have their jobs back. So we can't have fast-talking career gals like we used to. We need to have Doris Day. So this film, Pillow Talk, starring Doris Day and Rock Hudson, this is the promotional poster. I don't know if you can read these pink words on the side, but it says, "The uninhibited story of a carefree bachelor," of course, "a careful career girl, and how they learn that pillow talk is no fun, just for one." For Doris, a career is not a path to happiness. It's no fun, just for one. I need rock to make me complete. Rosalind Russell, Hildy, does she need Cary Grant to be complete? Oh, I am fond of you. I often wish you weren't such a stinker. That's what divorces are for. Bye-bye. She's independent. Of course, she does get back together with him in the end, so we have to acknowledge that. But the entire premise of Pillow Talk is that a career gal is incomplete. She thinks she's on the path to happiness, but she needs rock. He drags her out of bed at one point, if you haven't seen this film. Picks her up in her pajamas and scoops her off into the wilderness. We also get the era of Marilyn Monroe. We get Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. We get Betty Grable and Lauren Bacall and How to Marry a Millionaire, both in 1953. So we're codifying a ditzy, sexy gold digger as our main female character in this time. Lots of fun. These movies are a lot of fun. But if we're talking about female role models, not a high point in American film history, in my humble opinion. Which brings us to the 60s and the 70s. This is probably an era of film, not to make judgments of the crowd, that you're maybe a little less familiar with. Up until now in my talk, I have focused exclusively on mainstream, big-budget studio production coming out of Hollywood. And I'm going to take a quick digression here, and I promise it's worth it, so stick with me for a few. These are the heroines, action heroines of the 1960s and 70s in B-level, fringe, independent, extremely low-budget blaxploitation films. So we've got Pam Grier as Foxy Brown and Coffee, and Tamara Dobson as Cleopatra Jones in the middle. So these films are being made in the 60s. Height of civil rights, height of the Black Power movement, a lot of civil and political unrest and upheaval. And these films are geared toward Black audiences exclusively. They're not interested in white folks coming to see these movies. If they do, great, but they're not trying to reach them. They are trying to reach Black audiences. The heroes and heroines are tough, they're really cool, they are very sexual, they are often fighting white villains and usually corrupt police forces, is a general trend in these films. So in 1971, we have Shaft. Most of you have probably heard of that film, or 1972's Superfly. These both have male heroes, and based on the unbelievable success of these films, they decided to take a chance on heroines, and these are also unbelievably successful films, especially given how little it cost to make them. The return on their investment was like 300 to 1. Pretty nuts. So they made 60 of these films in the course of about 5 years, and they were all, for the most part, equally successful. So I took us on this quick digression from Hollywood because I don't believe we'd have the heroines we have today if these films didn't exist. If they didn't prove to be very profitable at the box office. And what they did was dramatically break with tradition in American filmmaking for what a woman can do on screen. So while they're very tough, they're the sexual aggressor, like a vamp. And they can best a man physically. So they can wrestle a bad guy to the ground in the streets. They can shoot him, they can choke him, they can do all kinds of active superhero style stuff in a way that no female American character had done up until this point. So it's a dramatic shift. And the only reason it's allowed, the only reason they can do something so dramatic is because it's so far on the fringe. Hollywood would never have taken a chance on something like this. They want predictability. They want to guarantee their return on their investment. These guys have nothing to lose and everything to gain by shaking it up, by experimenting, and they do, and it pays off. So these are like the great-grandmothers of the heroines we have today. So that's why I wanted to make sure I talked to you a little bit about them. They paved the way for characters like this in the 80s and 90s. So on the left we have Ellen Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver in the Aliens movies. And something's crazy with my slides. Well, this is Linda Hamilton in the middle. She plays Sarah Connor, so this is the Terminator series in the, 91 is Terminator 2. And then G.I. Jane, starring Demi Moore. I don't see it there, I think it's 97, 96, something like that. Look at the box office income. $1.6 billion. Let me look here at Terminator 2. $1.8 billion. G.I. Jane in the 650 million mark. And that's just because it's one movie instead of a series, instead of a franchise. So I gave this talk one time alongside a classicist, so someone who does like ancient Greek literature, can you imagine? And he was talking about Lysistrata. And he said, in classical literature, strong female characters can be powerful if they are coded as male or asexual. Their alternative is to give in to their sexuality and sacrifice some of their authority and power. So we can see his case played out right here. In the 80s, we didn't want to give in to the sexuality and lose some of the power. We were willing to allow our heroines to be gender transgressive, essentially. I show these pictures and clips to my female students, or male students, my young students, and they say some crazy stuff sometimes, like, well, is she even really a woman? Look at those muscles. They have some serious ideas about what is okay and what is not okay, and I like to hear it. I want to have conversations about it. They also always notice the size and position of the guns. In a very Freudian phallic sense, these women have big guns. And I love that my 20-year-old students are picking up on this. Whatever they may think, at the time, especially Ellen Ripley was considered a feminist icon. This idea that a woman could be tough and resourceful. She didn't have to be pretty. That wasn't important. What mattered is if she was capable. if she could get the job done. And in the case of Ripley, if she could rescue others, which she does successfully. So this was meaningful for a lot of people. I've read articles about young women growing up in the 80s who saw this character and believed for the first time that they could be something other than a beautiful cheerleader, that this mattered to them, that there was an option other than beautiful. So whatever my students today think, they're only thinking this because of we've had 35 years in between, and they're able to kind of even go back to feeling upset that they're not pretty. Because we had to have this first. We had to have a generation or two of women feel that it was okay to not be what we consider to be beautiful and pretty and clean and dry and petite. But they could be powerful and resourceful and important and look just like this. Of course, as with so many things, politics, film, you name it, when a pendulum swings, sometimes it tends to swing back, and we get the early 2000s. So if my heroines of the 80s and 90s are tough and resourceful, so are my heroines of the 2000s. They just look very different. So we're focusing now on the female body. We're proving that these tough girls are in fact women. And the best way for us to prove it is to show off their bodies. This one in particular down here, I don't know this franchise well, Resident Evil, starring Mila Jovovich, who started as a supermodel and became an actress. I don't know this, I've never seen any of these films, full disclosure. Look at the box office take though. $1.2 billion. Whatever I may think, whatever you may think, bottom line, a lot of people have seen these films, it's a franchise. And they have seen the Charlie's Angels films. Tomb Raider is rebooted, it's in theaters right now. They remade it and it's out right now. Catwoman, Elektra, even the flops, even Elektra, which was a huge failure, still made $56 million. So these were well seen. People saw this, and this was a trend, an overwhelming trend in the early 2000s. And this is when I started my scholarly film career, and these were the films I was looking at going, oh my God, how am I supposed to write scholarly work on this? Charlie's Angels, really? It's not just America though, it's everywhere. So we've got beautiful and deadly heroines in Hong Kong films. This is House of Flying Daggers by Zhang Yimou. Most people have seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, same genre, same idea, directed by Ang Lee. This one, next to the red dress, is called Hit and Miss, coming out of Britain. Next is The Nest, coming out of France. Chocolate from Thailand. Next one down, My Girlfriend is an Agent, South Korea, 2009. Chani Chak to China, 2009 from India. Rosario Tijeras is a Mexican, Colombian, Spanish co-production. Everybody got involved in this one. So it's not just us, it's not just Hollywood, this is a global trend. Women who can kick down the door, can shoot up the room, can protect themselves, can protect others, can rescue others. Damsel in distress. Aisle one. But I think we can see a big difference between these women and these. They're closer to this than they are to this in this current decade and sort of globally. While we may feel that action heroines represent progress, my question is, do they really? It depends on what they do and what they look like. I find that when action heroines are part of a team, that their toughness is routinely tempered by their primary role as the token female. And what they bring to the team is sex. The ability to seduce the bad guy and get some information out of him. Everybody else on the team has a different skill. Maybe there's the technical guy, and then there's the tough guy, and there's the driver, and there's the brains behind the whole thing. And then the token female uses her feminine wiles to get what we need in the given situation. And you just see this over and over and over again. This idea that she can distract and seduce the male target and contribute to her team, sure, but not through wit or skill or even strength, but through using something that's inherently female, seduction and manipulation and treachery. This is called setting the honey trap, and you'll see it over and over again. So I have a quick clip from, who knows, one of these Mission Impossible films. I can't keep them all straight, but it's just a perfect example of the honey trap.
Finally, we're alone.
Venus, now's the time you kick his ass and get the coat.
We are alone, aren't we?
No one will interrupt us.
Move and I break your neck. The override sequence for the relay station. Say it now or never speak again. The codes.
46, 82, 93.
A honey trap. I know. She goes, oh, God. Yes, I know. One genre that is not falling back on sort of these tired tropes of the token female or the honey trap are films geared toward teen audiences. This is really interesting to me. I have a 5-year-old daughter, so I'm really paying attention to what movies are made for young girls these days. And so we've got this current wave of action heroines who are much younger, they're teenagers, and 2 series in particular, the Hunger Games series and franchise and the Divergent series. So we can look at the years, 2012 to 2015 made $2.9 billion. Divergent series 2014 to 2016, it's up at $346 million and they're still making more. So I don't know the final box office take for this series. What's really interesting, anyone familiar with these characters at all? Oh, okay, oh, that's great. So I can say with confidence there is not a preteen or teenage girl in my life who is not completely obsessed with one or both of these characters. These are phenomena in a particular demographic, a teenager demographic. That's important. So they don't necessarily have the buying power of adults. We might not see their obsession reflected in box office sales, but my anecdotal knowledge and knowing lots of teenage girls, these 2 young women were hugely influential and important to them. So let's talk a tiny bit about who Katniss and Triss, the 2 characters, are. They possess a combination of qualities: strength, courage, skill, empathy, determination. They are flawed but admirable. And they acknowledge that oppression exists. Institutional, systemic oppression. And they're not just trying to critique it. They are capable of revolutionary change. They are going to change the system. They're not saving 1 or 2 people. They're not rescuing a young child like Ellen Ripley did in the 80s. They are going to change the entire system and make it more equitable. This is massive institutional change that these 2 female characters are able to achieve. And perhaps most importantly, they can do so without sacrificing or relinquishing their femininity, as our heroines had to do in the 80s and 90s, and more importantly, without having to rely on their femininity, as our heroines had to in the early 2000s. They don't have to do either of those things. They can achieve their systemic change without setting a honey trap. Stands in stark contrast to the girls I grew up with. Classic princesses, damsels in distress. My little girl won't even watch this. She is not interested. I tried to show her Sleeping Beauty twice because I thought it was so beautiful, the backgrounds in the film. Not interested. She likes these characters.
All right.
Yeah, so she's teaching Mama a thing or two, which I love. Disney and Pixar and the animated studios that are truly helping us raise our children in this country. These are the heroines that they are putting in front of our girls today. All the way over here we have Merida from the film Brave. Something's up, I don't see my box office numbers. Believe me, they made a ton of money. Merida, the premise is that there is a competition for who gets to marry her from the different tribes, and she breaks her dress, literally rips the seams of her confining princess dress, and decides she's gonna shoot for her own hand in marriage. We have, from Inside Out, Riley, she plays hockey. We have Moana, no love interest, solves all her problems, rescues everybody. Judy Hopps, Zootopia, she's the first bunny cop. What is that a reference to? What is that a metaphor for all our little girls, the first bunny cop? So Disney is a market. They want to sell action figures. They want to sell Happy Meals. They also want to sell tickets, and they know mamas and dads are not bringing their kids to this anymore. They're bringing their kids to this. They're listening to the market and giving the market what it demands. And it's shifting the expectations for young women in the films that they look at, and young men too. If you would have asked a Hollywood studio 10 years ago if this film could have gotten made, they would have laughed in your face and kicked you out the door. A film starring 3 smart women of color? Never would they have invested in this. This film had a budget of $25 million, made more than $169 million, and cleaned up at the Oscars. This Hollywood is listening to too. This is going to represent a shift. Moonlight, Black Panther, Get Out, all of these films starring people of color in major roles, not as the buddy, not as the friend, not as the next door neighbor. Hollywood is going to be listening to this as well. In 2017, the top 3 grossing films all had main female characters. Not the girlfriend, not the buddy. The main character was a young woman. Another big reason we're going to see a shift coming along is the increased commercial viability and popularity of female content creators. We can't only have, but it helps us to have great female characters if we have women writing them, if we have women directing the pictures. It's not essential, but it definitely helps. This is Patty Jenkins. She directed Wonder Woman. She's currently directing the sequel. This is Greta Gerwig. She wrote and directed Lady Bird. Did you see Lady Bird? Yes. So great. So in the past, we've had powerful women in Hollywood making films. Mary Pickford, who I mentioned before, Katharine Hepburn, Barbra Streisand, even Angelina Jolie. But these were actresses who wanted control over their own careers and got into the content creation business in order to have more autonomy, more power. Female content creators like Patty Jenkins and Greta Gerwig are interested in writing roles for others, making films for other women, and so that's a shift as well. Keep an eye out for Ava DuVernay. She's in the top. She directed the documentary 13th that was on Netflix that cleaned up 2 years ago. She has A Wrinkle in Time, Disney adaptation. It's in theaters right now. And who do we have on the side? Josie Rourke. This film is in production right now. It's a Mary Queen of Scots biopic starring Saoirse Ronan as Mary and Margot Robbie as Elizabeth I. So that one I can pretty much guarantee is gonna be phenomenal and directed by a woman. So if a century ago our female ideal looked something like this, we took many twists and turns to get us to a female ideal that looks like this. People are calling Wonder Woman a post-feminist icon, and that's a lot of academic speak, but what it means is tough and beautiful are not mutually exclusive. I don't have to choose whether I'm beautiful or whether I'm tough. I can be both. She's powerful, but she isn't asexual. She's feminine, but she isn't duplicitous. She is what we'd want. We think about mass media as a business. We think about how we tell Hollywood what we want. We think about how Hollywood tells us what we think we want and how that dynamic goes back and forth with our box office. Oops. The box office take for Wonder Woman, let me go back a couple slides. Let's take a quick look. Oops, there it is. $821,762,450 to date. Isn't that just one film alone? It broke records, and it will, no doubt, with its sequel, continue to do so. And I think is helping to usher in a new post-feminist action heroine who isn't giving up her femininity, but nor is she giving up her power. Thank you so much, and I would love to hear what you guys think of the rise of the heroine in American film.
Well, I have a question. I thought it was interesting that the Beauty and Beast movie made 1 million, what was it, 1 million?
1 billion.
But the animated film, the children aren't watching.
Right.
But I guess it was us that went to see that movie. right?
This one,
Yeah, that Beauty and the Beast.
I took my little girl to see it. She probably saw it in the movie theater like 3 times. So there are some slight changes to if you've seen the animated version and the live action version. Belle is much less a damsel in distress the second time around. There is a borderline gay character, which is people kind of made some waves. People thought that was kind of interesting. I think Disney is savvy. I think they understand that they can push the envelope a little bit and stay relevant. The last thing Disney wants to seem is old-fashioned and dusty and not with it. They need to be at the forefront. They want to still be the place where every parent takes their kid to see whatever Disney movie is out. And so the Beauty and the Beast reboot was just a shift enough. Not radical. She's not wearing combat boots and kicking down the door, but she is much more active than in the animated version. Yes, ma'am.
I was so impressed with Frances McDormand.
Oh, yeah.
She had to explain what she meant by that inclusion,
Yeah.
or whatever it was. What do you think the effect is going to be on the industry? Somebody's going to have to give up some money if we're going to pay women the same amount as we pay men.
It's such a good question. So it's this idea about the Me Too movement and gender gap, wage gap in, oh, do I have that slide? Hold on. I may have something for you that I hid. Let's see. Yeah, right here. So, can you see it okay? So this is the prevalence of female speaking characters in 800 films in percentages from 2007 to 2015. So on average, top 800 films every single year, just about 30% of the speaking parts are female parts. This is my theory about how to fix the wage gap. The reason women are willing to take less is because their opportunities are so much fewer, right? If I had 20 options, and this one's paying me $10, and this one's paying me $15, and this one's paying me $20, and depending on what kind of character I want to play, whatever, I'm gonna probably pick one on this end. But if I have one option, I'm gonna take what I can get. So the best way, in my opinion, to fix that inequality is for us to have way more excellent speaking parts for actresses. This is something that can be achieved, especially if we've got content creators who are interested in telling female stories, therefore we'll have female characters. And if it's clear to studios that a female-led film won't be box office poison. So if we look at this slide, 2017, a female-led film is clearly not box office poison. So Hollywood is like a slow-moving ship. It's gonna take a little while. A lot of these films were in the pipeline 4 years ago and they're just coming out now. It's not gonna happen tomorrow, but I do think that given the pressure from Netflix and Hulu and all these streaming services, if the studios want your money, they wanna stay competitive, then they're gonna have to do a better job of reaching 50% of the population. And 50% of the population wants to see these kinds of pictures. So I do believe they'll be made. It's just gonna take us some time. But I think I'm a Pollyanna, but I do think we're on the right track. I can see really bright light at the end of the tunnel, which gives me a lot of hope. Did that answer your question? Okay, great. I'm gonna put this back big again so you don't see all my nonsense.
Are there any other questions? This is just personal interest. What about Scarlet O'Hara? In what category or categories?
Oh, good question.
It was Lila Everett's. And I feel like Lila maybe majored in economics because she didn't want to become like Scarlet. Isn't that right, Lila?
No, I was Scarlet.
You were Scarlet. Scarlet was important for 2 reasons. Scarlet controlled her own destiny. For better or for worse, like her, love or hate her, she controlled her own destiny. Once she was able to see the writing on the wall, she wanted to avoid a fate like so many other young women in her world, and so she became the master of her own destiny. So that's powerful, and it's important because of the time in which Gone with the Wind came out. It's also really important because the film was such a blockbuster. If it was on the fringe, if Scarlett was in a little independent film that nobody ever saw, I don't know that she would matter as much in the trajectory of the heroine. But just like some of these other ones, if I did, adjusted for inflation, what Gone with the Wind made, it would explode our minds right now. It was a phenomenon and an event. You know, people would line up for days. The premieres were covered all over the world. And so this idea that a film would feature a character like Scarlett taking control of her own life was so widely seen by so many, especially Southern audiences. I think it was hugely important. And maybe if I redo this talk, I might put in a slide about Scarlett. It's a really good idea because I don't know that we would have had some of the other take no prisoners type of heroines down the line if we didn't have Scarlett before her. Thank you. Good idea.
Let's thank Rachel.
Oh, thank you.